I am, quite honestly, very deeply honored to be here with you. My Canada is the kind of country where trade unions and free collective bargaining makes our economy stronger and Canada a better place. It is as important a part of a strong and growing economy as capital investment, reasonable profits, and fair wages. And without collective bargaining, there's never any guarantee on the fair wages. And without fair wages, we're not building a society of which we can be proud and we can transfer to our kids and our grandchildren, knowing we've transferred them something that reflects our values as Canadians. In other words, the right of working men and women to unionize was at the root of Tory policy less than 5 years after Confederation. This is not some new thing that came rolling in with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This has been part of who we are as Canadians from the very beginning. The famous campaign poster of Sir John A., which I have in my office, entitled "The Old Man, the Old Party, the Old Policy," has Sir John A. being carried not on the shoulders of folks in pinstripe suits and Homburg hats and high collars, but on the shoulders of factory workers and farmers. He was their guy, and they knew it. So the very growth of Canada and the successive wave of immigrants that built Canada depended in some measure on protecting trade union rights. My friends, they did then, and they still do now. My dad was a taxi driver in Montreal. They used to call him the Snowden Hustler, number 100 veterans cabs. And one Passover Seder, he showed up in a new suit. Looked nice, trim, well put together. My grandfather welcomed him at the door, said, "That's a new suit, Morris." He said, "Yes, it is, Dad." He said, "Can I see the inside?" It was a Samuelson suit. It was not a union-made suit. He kicked my father out of the Seder until he went home and put on that old suit, which was a union-made suit. Here's what Sir John A. said to the Toronto Trades Council when he was fighting for that bill to legalize their right to organize. And I quote, "I ought to have a special interest in this subject because I am a working man myself. I know that I work more than 9 hours every day." He didn't say sober, he just said work 9 hours every day. "And I think I'm a pretty good mechanic. If you look at the Confederation Act, in the framing of which I had some hand, you will admit that I'm a pretty good joiner and carpenter. And as for cabinet making, well, I think I've done as well as anyone might expect, given the timber I had." My friends, that's the kind of conservative you have standing in front of you this morning. That's why it's an honor to be here with you and to wish you well at this meeting and your important work in the weeks and months and years ahead for a strong economy and a better opportunity, more fairness, equality of opportunity for more Canadians. That is why I opposed Bill C-377. I said in my speech that, it had many things to commend it except for these simple facts. It was bad law. It was unconstitutional. It was a violation of privacy for millions of Canadians, and at best, in terms of transparency, needlessly redundant. I was one senator who said that, but I had senators on both sides of the chamber voting with me to amend that bill, essentially gut it, and send it back to the other place. And just so you have a status report, had that bill gone back to the House of Commons, and had the House of Commons met to consider it, that would have been one state of affairs. But the House of Commons wasn't there to receive it because Parliament had been prorogued. And under our rules, a private member's bill reappears at the beginning of the process it was in when there's prorogation. So that bill sits on the order paper, not yet been called, unchanged from the amendments that I had proposed and others had accepted. My expectation is that it will not be called for the foreseeable future. My expectation is that the new Minister of Labour will be reflecting on what can be done, not to promote that bill, but to look at other ways in the federal jurisdiction, perhaps, to bring some measure of comparable transparency to that which exists in provincial jurisdictions across the country. And I do believe that she will be consulting broadly with your leadership in that process. But let me be clear as clear as I can with you this morning. If the government calls that bill in its unamended form, as I stand before you today, I will stand in my place in the Senate to oppose it once again. My brothers and sisters, solidarity is a word associated with unions. Freedom may be a word we take for granted, but in my Canada, both sustain each other. When unions and their members and locals help the United Way across Canada, that is solidarity. This year alone, your union locals have contributed across this great country $250 million to United Way. And as one of the volunteer heads of United Way in my community of Kingston, I want to tell you, hospital workers, corrections workers, unionized locals right across the community made an unbelievable contribution to help put us over the top in that small little Ontario city, and that is something for which all Kingstonians will be forever grateful. When the unions stepped up as partners in the difficult circumstance when the restructuring of our auto industry was necessary, I call that solidarity. Saving jobs, saving an industry, and taking more than your fair share of sacrifice in the process. When a union of dock workers helped bring down a totalitarian communist regime in Poland, its name was solidarity. For me, solidarity, freedom, profit, and prosperity are all part of the values we share as Canadians, and we have a lot of work to do together. On good jobs, and I think your coming summit on good jobs is a vital point of focus on the difference between real work, fair pay, and something that is less and commodified to the point where the human being doesn't seem to count. I believe we need to do work on a minimum annual income for every single Canadian. And let me tell you something, when the Swiss Federation, and the Swiss are not known as radical lefties or folks who don't believe in frugality or who don't believe in hard work, when they are planning a referendum on a minimum annual pay from the government for everybody, a basic grant, so there would be no poor people in that country, that tells you that this is an idea whose time is in front of us and where we can work together to make such great progress. And let me say this. The RAND formula is not likely to come up in the Senate of Canada. But if it does, there'll be a lot of us standing up to support it and defend it as a rational way to make sure that everybody in a working community benefits and pays the price of the leadership and the bargaining units that are there with their shoulder to the wheel at the coalface, fighting for fair conditions for everybody in that working circumstance. So let me finish with a prediction. What happens when you get solidarity and freedom working together? What's the potential of that? Let me quote from the words to an anthem you may all know a little better than me. There can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. God bless you all. Thank you.